Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 25th of May, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So Base has published their Path to Base mainnet blog post and Twitter thread here. Now, this is obviously a pretty big update in the world of Base here. For those of you who don't know, Base is Coinbase's layer 2 rollup on Ethereum, built using Optimism's OP stack here. Now, they've outlined exactly what their path to mainnet is going to look like. So here they say, as we approach mainnet, we've defined a set of criteria that will unlock our launch. So they've already completed a successful testnet hard fork and a successful infrastructure review with OP Labs. Now they're waiting for the OP mainnet to upgrade to Bedrock. They're waiting for completion of audits with no critical issues and testnet stability. And then after the mainnet launch, they will enter something called a Genesis window, which is a time for developers to deploy dApps on the base mainnet, which is similar to what Arbitrum did and Optimism had something similar as well. And I think like even the other L2s like ZK Sync and stuff like that have had similar things. During this window, the base core team will provide hands-on support to developers deploying their dApps and will recognize early dApps launching on base. So an exciting update here. You can read the blog post for full details on this. Polynear did bring up an interesting point here in reply where they said, I see fraud proofs and such are missing from the mainnet criteria. I understand the time to market needs, but might I suggest an aggressive TVL cap? Coinbase as a public US company is potentially more likely to be scrutinized or sanctioned as a centralized chain. Now, I've talked about these risks in the past. Obviously, given that that base is going to be pretty centralized from the start, what happens if someone deploys Tornado Cash on there? Is I guess like Coinbase going to censor that because they are a US based company, right? They're going to be the only ones running the sequencer on the base rollup. Are they going to be engaging in censorship there? I don't know. It kind of feels like it's kind of like a coin toss because Coinbase has led one of the lawsuits against the Treasury Department around the sanctions on Tornado Cash, but at the same time they still have to abide by them, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I really do think that someone is going to deploy Tornado Cash to base relatively quickly just to test the waters, and as I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see them censor it because they're the only ones going to be running a sequencer. Now, obviously, when they decentralize that out, hopefully sooner rather than later, that won't really be an issue. But while it's centralized, that obviously is a concern and something that people, I think, should be prepared for. And I can already see the FUD, right? I can see the base launching, someone launching Tornado Cash on there, and then potentially it getting censored on base, and then straight away all the FUDsters come out and say, "Oh, look, base is centralized, so much for decentralized finance, or so much for crypto values, blah, blah, blah," right? When in reality, Base is not going to be decentralized from day one. They're not making any kind of claims to that, but they have said they want to decentralize it over time. Now, obviously, we don't know how long that time is going to be, but hey, there are other rollups out there that are more mature, but that still aren't fully decentralized or anywhere close to that, right? And they've been around for quite a while, so I think we can cut Base some slack here. But yeah, be prepared for FUD if that was to happen. That's for sure. And also around fraud proofs here, Base isn't even going to have, I guess, like permission fraud proofs or anything like that. And I think that's because Optimism doesn't really have the fraud proofs kind of live yet on the OP stack, so they're probably waiting for that. But at the same time, because it's like totally centralized, you probably don't need fraud proofs, or at least maybe you'll have permissioned fraud proofs, but we'll have to see. I think it's a great point that Polynear bring up here, but I think that I want to set the expectation now that as bullish as I am on Base and as excited as I am for it, it's going to be a very neutered version of what like an L2 rollup can be, at least from the start, right? It's gonna have cheaper fees, it's gonna have faster transactions. And it's going to be obviously supported by Coinbase, so you'll be able to bridge in and out of it through the Coinbase exchange. But it is not going to be decentralized from day one. It is not going to have decentralized sequencing and validating. It is not going to be something that you can get that you can expect to get like some full censorship resistance from. So I just want to set that baseline now so that people aren't surprised by that. And I'm sure all the Refuel watchers and listeners out there, you guys know that this will be the case. But be prepared for FUD around that. That's for sure. Now, there was one other thing they mentioned at the start here. in their thread where they said, reminder, Base has no plans to issue a network token. And I've talked about this before and about the implications around this. It wouldn't really make sense for them to issue a token for Base. I mean, one, because Coinbase is a US traded public company, so there's already a coin stock that's tied to Coinbase. Two, it really does open them up to regulatory scrutiny. Three, they don't need it. Even to decentralize the sequencer, I don't think they need to do it. I think what they could do is they could just have ETH as the staking token and then pay out the fees to the sequencers, right? Pay and to people staking their ETH to become a sequencer. But you know what's funny? They could even get away with just altruism on the sequencer side of things, at least for a little while, where I reckon people would be happy to run validators or run sequences on Base for free, basically. I mean, I know I'd probably be interested in that because I already have the infrastructure up and running for running these sorts of stuff. So and it's obviously not going to be a huge cost because it's just a sequencer, right? It's just it's not proof of work or anything like that. But we'll have to see how that plays out there. And then Benji here, who works in the Optimism ecosystem, said to everyone asking for a token, instead ask what will happen when you have a chance to bring dApps to 110 million people for the first time ever. Build products instead. And I think this is an important point as well, where people will always ask for tokens because they want to hopefully get an airdrop, right, and get free money. But hey, if you're holding ETH, right, or if you're holding some other tokens out there, and you're holding like a DApp token that launches on Base and suddenly has like a massive new pool of users to tap into, well, isn't that better than Coinbase doing a token, which inevitably will probably just bleed, right? Because a lot of these tokens that get hyped up, they obviously have a high value when they launch and then bleed against USD and ETH over the longer term. But would you rather that your current bags or the bags that you purchase in the future for whether they be apps or ETH or L2 tokens, for example, like OP, because this is built on the OP stack. Maybe this, maybe Base makes value flow to OP. I think I'd personally rather that than Base doing a token and then and that becoming a thing that everyone kind of speculates on. Whereas you bring in all these new people, you bring in potentially 110 million registered Coinbase users. Obviously, it's not going to be that much, but it's going to be more than what we have today, and that will lead to more liquidity, more money into the ecosystem, which should, I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but it should, and I believe that it should drive value to the most successful apps on the Base network, as well as things like ETH and potentially even the OP token. Now, none of that is investment advice. I'm not telling you to go out there and buy anything, right? Or buy OP, buy ETH. I'm not telling you that. I actually, as bullish as I am on ETH, I don't think I've ever actually directly said on the refuel to go and buy ETH, because I give you the bull case, I give you my reasoning behind it, and then it's your choice whether you want to buy it or not, how long you want to hold it for, whether you want to be a trader or an investor. But I think overall, we really shouldn't care if Base does a token or not. Honestly, we shouldn't even ask for it. We should really care about onboarding as many people as possible. And then if you're in it for monetary reasons or speculative reasons, there are plenty of ways to speculate on and play the Base kind of ecosystem in my mind. Anyway, I'll link this thread in the YouTube description below for you to go check out. All right, speaking of optimism, OP Labs' Twitter account here has put together a thread about catching up on the improvements coming with Bedrock. So Bedrock is less than 2 weeks away, as they say here, so very close now. And if you're interested and what Bedrock is actually bringing to the Optimism network, well, this is the TLDR recap thread for you. And I'll mention a few of these things just to quickly recap it for you. So Bedrock's optimized data compression strategy will majorly reduce gas fees, so similar to what Nitro did for Arbitrum. So that's obviously something that end users are going to feel immediately. Bedrock also transforms the OP stack into a more modular and flexible system, which is obviously something that Optimism is really focused on now, getting that OP stack built out so that other teams can build their own OP chains and then become part of the super chain, sort of exactly like what Base is doing. And then they continue on in this thread here, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But I just thought this was a great recap thread that you should definitely go check out, because I'm super excited to see Bedrock finally go live. And I'm super excited to see the fact that the L2s are just finding their own place in the L2 landscape. And I've talked about this before, of course, but I really like that Optimism is targeting this kind of OP stack thing that they're doing and this super chain thing that they're doing. And I'm really happy that Arbitrum is targeting, is building things like Arbitrum Nova, but also targeting different programming languages and non-EVM kind of things like EWASM. It used to be known as EWASM. That used to be part of the core Ethereum roadmap. But WASM, which is WebAssembly, and other such things like that, and other L2s targeting different things. So just super excited about that. And I'm actually going to talk about the Arbitrum thing in a sec, but you can go read this Twitter thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so as I said, Arbitrum or Off-Chain Labs, the builders of Arbitrum today announced that they've been working towards building Stylus, which is an upgrade to the Arbitrum tech stack. And I've covered Stylus before. It's basically the way developers are going to be able to build on Arbitrum networks without having to build in just Solidity. They'll be able to build in basically any language that they want. And then Off-Chain Labs today announced that they've written a complete working fraud prover for Stylus. So this is very cool. So essentially, as I said, Stylus allows users to deploy contracts written in their favorite programming languages such as Rust, C, C++, and more. You can check out Stylus here. And currently, the Arbitrum Nitro stack is the only EVM equivalent rollup with working fraud proofs. This is achieved by enforcing safety directly at the WASM level or WebAssembly level. Now with Stylus, their Off-Chain Labs has leveraged Nitro to also enforce safety in the WebAssembly in WASM for style contracts, broadening EVM plus support. And yeah, that's what they're calling it. Basically, they're calling it EVM plus. So basically sticking with the EVM, but making it better, right? Building on top of it. And this is something that I actually discussed quite a while ago about L2s. And I'm glad that Arbitrum is targeting this, where essentially you don't have to be limited to what the EVM is on layer 1 Ethereum. The EVM on layer 1 Ethereum is always going to be much more simple and much less expressive and I guess like experimental than it will be on the L2s. And the L2s can go ahead and just basically do whatever they want. And this is why I spoke yesterday about enshrined rollups versus non-enshrined rollups. You wouldn't be able to do this on an enshrined rollup. Like none of what you've seen from OP Labs with the Bedrock upgrade or from Off-Chain Labs with Stylus or anything like that, that would not be able to be done on the enshrined rollup without going through the Ethereum governance process, the Ethereum L1 governance process. Like it can be done. It's probably more complex and more risky, but it can't be done in the same way that it can be done at L2 because, as I said, you have to go through the Ethereum L1 governance process, which is not something that I think a lot of people want to have to go through in order to build their stuff because it's at minimum 6 months between network upgrades. Sometimes longer. I mean, most of Ethereum's life has actually been longer than that. Very few EIPs actually make it into the network. There is a lot of governance discussions around it before it gets into the network. There's a lot of potential drama that can arise from it. There are things that if it's considered overly complex and not worth the effort, it's just not going to go into the network. Whereas with L2s and the different L2s out there, they can actually just build in their own little, I guess, silos and have their own community, but still obviously settle to Ethereum, but have a lot more flexibility around what they do when it comes to how they build out their tech stack, which is why, as I mentioned yesterday, one of the biggest reasons I'm most bullish on non-enshrined rollups over enshrined rollups. Now, that's not to say enshrined rollups don't have their place. And what's really cool, from my understanding, and I was actually just reading about this recently, is that with an enshrined rollup at layer 1, you could potentially have the L2 rollups tapping into that one, and then the enshrined rollups would give the L2s even cheaper fees. Now, I don't know if that is 100% correct or if it works like that, but from my understanding, it should work like that. So, I mean, Ethereum will probably have both of them eventually, but I do think that in terms of Ethereum's rollup-centric roadmap, it's much better for us to focus on having an expressive ecosystem of different teams building different L2s and rollups and L3s and whatever else, rather than just limiting ourselves to something like an enshrined rollup on L1. That's not to say that we shouldn't have an enshrined rollup so that L2s and other and users on L1 can take advantage of that, but I don't think it should be the be-all, end-all, or kind of like end game for Ethereum. I think the end game for Ethereum is a large network of extremely expressive designs for different kind of like walks of life, different developers, different people, and all of that kind of settles down to Ethereum, and we have this harmonious ecosystem rather than something that is fragmented or something that is, I guess, like monopolized, I should say, not fragmented. But speaking of, I guess, fragmentation, this is a perfect segue into the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I'll talk about in a sec. I'll just say that I will link this thread from Off-Chain Labs in the YouTube description below for you to check out more details about what I'm talking about. But Connext, which is a bridging protocol, or I guess like interoperability protocol, that he's building on Ethereum and obviously other chains, announced today that they started off this tweet thread by saying that currently interacting with an app across chains is difficult and time consuming. You have to select the right network, bridge assets, get gas tokens, etc., etc. And they say here Web3 users deserve a better experience. So today they've introduced something called Chain Abstraction, which allows for onboarding users from anywhere regardless of the chain they are on. So this is basically what I've been advocating for quite a while now when it comes to interoperability between different chains, especially different L2s. You basically want to abstract away, I should say, every complexity for the user. So bridging assets, choosing the right network, getting gas tokens, that shouldn't be something that is presented to the end user. What they should see is basically a 1 to 2 click thing that they can play around, they can use in order to get to where they want to go. Now, you can read this blog post for full details about how this is going to work, but an analogy I like to use is something like, if you're using these things to travel between different points, think about a robust public transportation system and a really shitty public transportation system. So I'm going to use 2 examples here. I think that I've used Japan's public transportation system, especially their metro system, and it is the best I've ever used by far. And that's not just me saying it. Obviously, it is praised all around the world for how good it is. And then you have the public transportation system in the US, which all I hear about from everyone is that it's incredibly bad. So if you're using this analogy, we need to make the experience between bridging between different L2s and chains like Japan's metro system and not like the US metro system, which it currently is like the US metro system. And I'm not trying to fight the US here or anything like that, but you want to hear praise for bridging between different things, and you want to hear people not even really having to worry about it. I mean, I'm sure people that live in Japan don't even worry about if their train's going to be on time, or if their train connects them to where they want to go, or whatever else, or if their kind of their card's going to work, or if there's going to be violence on the train or anything like that. I don't think they worry about that at all. When I was traveling in Japan for 3 weeks, I didn't worry about the train being on time, and if I missed the train, another one was coming like 2 minutes later. Whereas, I mean, Australia's not got the best public transport either, mind you. If I'm comparing it to where I live in Melbourne, I mean, I don't catch it much anymore, but I have friends that do, and when I used to, it's not great, right? It is basically built as an afterthought after the developers have gone in and built all the properties in a new estate. What ends up happening is that, I mean, the same is true, I think, in the US. They just build a train station out there, but I mean, it's not great, right? Whereas in Japan, I don't know exactly how they built it in Japan, but essentially they're very high density, so they obviously needed a good public transportation system, and it's so good that it really just is something that is expected to work all the time and expected to be on time, expected to offer a great user experience, basically. So I think that's where we need to go with these kind of bridging protocols and these interoperability protocols, especially on top of Ethereum with the L2s and the rollups, because if we don't do that, yes, there'll be liquidity fragmentation, but I think that what's worse than liquidity fragmentation is just user fragmentation, and basically confusing users. Because let's say, for example, someone goes to Arbitrum and they're like, okay, I'm on Arbitrum now, going to play around here, going to do this stuff here. And then they're like, oh, damn, like this thing that I want to do is actually on Optimism. And then they're like, okay, well, I have to bridge over there and I have to get my funds over there somehow. And they have to go through all this complex bridging. That's not how we're going to get mass adoption. And I even think that people kind of bridging to Arbitrum or bridging to Optimism, bridging to anything is not how we're going to get mass adoption. We're going to get mass adoption by people building stuff on top of protocols like Connext that allow them to easily tap into all of these different rollups and L2s and basically places where liquidity exists, and then offering that product to their users in a simple way, like 1 to 2 clicks to do whatever you want. You know, maybe you want to get some yield, right? And maybe that the product doesn't even tell you where the yield is coming from. They just say to you, hey, you know, where such and such, you earn a 5% yield with us, or whatever it is, 5-10% yield with us on your dollars. And then in the background, they put those funds into some app on some chain somewhere, and they're using Connext to do that. So that's what I think the end game is for these interoperability protocols. And if you want to learn more about Connext solution, you can check it out. I'll link the thread in the YouTube description below. All right. So speaking of rollups, this has been an L2 slash rollup heavy episode today, but it was a lot of interesting things. So I figured I'd talk about them. But Figment Capital here has put together a blog post proposing a new mechanism to decentralize sequences called distributed sequencer technology. Now, if this rings a bell, it's because there is something called distributed validator technology, or DVT, like Obel and SSV network that I've talked about a bunch of times on the Refuel before. Well, this is a similar concept here of having distributed sequences instead of distributed validators. So they would be kind of like a similar thing where essentially you have, you can see here, distributed sequencer in the image here. You have Ethereum L1, then you have sequencer 1, but it's split up into different kind of parts, all sequencing the one rollup, just like you would have when you have a DVT cluster for Ethereum validators. But yeah, this blog post is actually quite long. I think it's about a 12-minute read, so you can go check this out for yourself. But great to see more designs coming to the sequencer space. I think the next frontier for L2s and rollups is basically creating the best sequences that we can in a decentralized way, because there is going to be a lot of fee revenue that is captured, and there already is, that is captured by these L2s. And obviously people are going to want to run sequences to capture some of that value. So we want ways for people to do that in a decentralized and censorship-resistant way without a reliance on some kind of like centralized mega sequencer or anything like that. So you can go give Figment Capital's blog post a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, something I missed the other day. So this is actually quite a while ago now. This is 2 weeks ago, but it came across my feed today. Liam's here, who is building Dappnet that I've covered on the Refuel before. Basically, Dappnet is a way for people to install. I mean, basically a client that people can install that allows them to use decentralized front ends to access their favorite apps. They have launched their Alpha edition here, and they've made a really cool actual little trailer here, which you should watch. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Basically, parodying the "you wouldn't download a car, you wouldn't steal a movie" piracy kind of, I guess, or anti-piracy spot that was very popular, I think, in the maybe early mid 2000s. I don't know when it was created, but I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. But with the Dappnet Alpha, on Mac OS, you can access Curve, ENS, 1inch, and other websites deployed to .eth domains, and they can never be censored, captured, or shut down. Now, this is another thing that I think is extremely needed, but something that is both underfunded, underappreciated, people aren't paying enough attention to, because people always complain when a centralized DeFi front end does some kind of censorship or blocks something or does like an OFAC censorship, but then they won't understand that it's done at the front end level, not at the contract level. So all you need to do is go use a different front end. Now, of course, if you want to be able to do this in a fully decentralized, censorship resistant way where you're not relying on third-party front ends at all, you can do it with Dappnet. Now, Dappnet, as I said, is in alpha right now, so it's obviously not production software just yet, but it's something that you can use on Mac OS, and it basically allows you to access all of these websites that are deployed to .eth domains via things like IPFS. Now, they say here that it can never be censored, captured, or shut down, but from my understanding, there is still a risk here when hosting it on using centralized, I guess, like domain resolvers, like .eth and things like that. But in saying that, it is a lot better than those centralized front ends and those third-party front ends that we're all used to. So you should definitely go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But this is something that I think that more people should pay attention to. It should get funding. It should be a public good. I don't think it should be this VC-backed thing that issues a token and that, it's governance, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think it should just be built as a public good, like what I mentioned yesterday with the ETH Wizard tool, because these things are what's needed to actually keep the full decentralized censorship resistance dream alive, not just at the chain level, but also at the user-facing level, the front-end level. So kudos to Liam's for building this and for updating it and for entering alpha here. Sorry about I missed it 2 weeks ago, Liam, but you can go check it out. I'll link this thread in the YouTube description below. All right, Owaki from Gitcoin has announced that Greenpill V2 is now here. So you can check this out at greenpill.network. There's a new direction. Greenpill V1 was a book, and so V2 is a network. They've got 24 chapters located across the globe and are growing. There's also new branding here. You can see on the image, there's a new focus on V1 was about theories theories and mental models. V2 is about local action, and they'll be authoring local regen guides. Now, regen stands for regenerative or regenerative finance instead of degenerative finance, instead of being a degen. And a lot of you will know that because if you hold the Daily Gwei 1-year anniversary NFT, you're able to access the regens channel in the Discord channel. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things that Owiki talks about in this thread in relation to the Greenpill network, which you can go check out. But I thought the website was really cool, looks really cool. I think the fact that they're taking this next step in order to bring all of this theory and mental model, all of this theory and these mental models to the real world and actually put it in action and put it in practice is the next logical step. Because it's all well and good to have all these amazing theories and all these amazing mental models that you think can work. Yeah, okay, you think it can work. You think it can work, but what you need to do is you need to test it. You need to test it in the real world, and that's actually something that Vitalik recently did. I'm sure you've seen some people talking about this on Twitter. There was Zuzalu pop-up network state in Montenegro that Vitalik put together himself, and he invited a bunch of crypto people, AI people, I think longevity people, basically to work and live together in this pop-up network state. Now, I think he plans to do this each year in a different city, but that's basically taking the concept of the network state, which is something that Balaji has talked a lot about, and bringing it to the real world, not just looking at the theory, but also looking at it in practice. So if you were at Zuzalu, I'm sure you had a great time there. I was actually invited, but couldn't make it work, unfortunately. But yeah, that's what I mean by putting these things into practice rather than keeping them in theory land, because I think in crypto we love to keep things in theory land when it comes to stuff that is not necessarily speculative, because when it's speculative, you don't want to keep it in theory land because there's potentially massive amounts of money to be made. But when it comes to things like social coordination, human coordination, public goods funding, stuff like that, traditionally we have put it into practice via things like Gitcoin, but it is a lot, I think, more muted than the degenerative stuff or the degen stuff, because obviously that speculative mania doesn't exist in the same fashion there. But anyway, you can go check out greenpill.network. I'll link a wikis thread in the YouTube description below for you to read all about it, as well as check out the website. Now, got a few minutes here. Wanted to talk about something that I thought was kind of important today, that I actually spoke about in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. So someone asked me about this recent move on Nvidia's stock overnight. Apparently, it went up like 35%, and that was like more than ETH's market cap. And I replied to this person and I said, basically, what you need to understand is that Nvidia's market cap is already really large. So a 35% move for Nvidia's market cap, obviously Nvidia having, I think it's an $800 or $900 billion market cap is going to be larger than Ethereum's market cap. But then if you look at Ethereum, look at ETH's market cap, which is around 210 billion. If ETH was to move just 10%, it would add $21 billion to its market cap, which would be bigger than every single L1 out there except Bitcoin and XRP, I think, as well. But all the other ones would just be dwarfed by Ethereum, their entire market cap. So when comparing market caps, you have to do it with context. And then the second part of the question here that the person asked in the Discord channel was around where I kind of see Ethereum going and how long I see it taking Ethereum to basically be integrated in the entire world's, I guess, financial system. So if Ethereum does succeed at what it's trying to do, it's going to take a while, guys. Like I said, 20 plus years as my answer here for it to basically saturate and become part of the everyday, I guess, global economy. I think it can potentially take longer than that. It depends on how fast a lot of the world wants to move on this stuff. Obviously, technology makes things move faster than usual, but I think we're still in the very, very early days in terms of how many on-chain users there are. And I'm not talking about people holding crypto on a centralized exchange. I'm talking about people who have actually used on-chain products and services, and maybe not just use them once. I'm talking like use them quite actively, maybe at least like once a month, right? Or potentially once a week. It has to be a few million at most out of the, 8+ billion people on the planet. Yeah, we've got a long ways to go. We've got a lot of growth to go. Obviously, there's a lot of money in crypto right now, but there's still a lot of money left to come in, a lot of value to be generated. So this is a multi-decade game, and I hope you guys are in it for the long term like I am, especially. And maybe I'll still be doing doing the refuel in 20 years. That'll be funny when I'm 51. I'll be doing the refuel still, hopefully. But anyway, I digress there. I'm going to leave it at that for today's episode. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.